Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're taking a slightly different approach. We're going to look at the history of Johannes Gutenberg, but we're framing it as a gritty, visionary, almost Silicon Valley-style startup narrative. Because honestly, when you really look at it, Gutenberg didn't just build a machine. He launched a massive venture around literally the most disruptive technology of the 15th century. We're jumping right in with this awe-struck review from the year 1455. It's actually from a future pope writing to a cardinal, and he is just marveling at a completely novel product he saw in Frankfurt. He wrote, "The script is extremely neat and legible. You would be able to read it without effort and indeed without glasses." I mean, that quote perfectly captures the magical, world-altering impacts of Gutenberg's flagship product right as it hit the market. But how exactly did he get there?
Section 1. A mysterious patrician youth.
Okay, to understand the machine, we really have to understand the man behind it. Johannes Gutenberg's early life was marked by intense class conflict and a lot of moving around. There are massive gaps in his biography. He was born into a privileged patrician family in Mainz around the year 1400, but was forced out due to violent guild conflicts, eventually surfacing in Strasbourg by 1434. But the big thing to notice is what happened in 1439. That was his first major startup failure. He was part of this venture selling polished metal mirrors to pilgrims heading to Aachen. The pitch was that these mirrors would capture holy light from relics. Great idea, right? Well, a severe flood delayed the exhibition by a whole year, the capital was already burned through, and the venture completely collapsed. Just a classic entrepreneurial misadventure. Section 2. The secret of movable type. So Gutenberg doesn't just give up after the whole mirror disaster. Instead, he goes into what we would call stealth mode. He launches this secret R&D project mysteriously titled Invention and Kunst, Enterprise and Art. Now, when we think of the printing press, we usually just picture the big wooden press itself. But the true genius wasn't just adapting an agricultural wine press. The real breakthrough, the core of this whole enterprise, was inventing a practical way to mass-produce metal letters. And that is what we call movable type. The sheer mechanical engineering required to pull this off, at least according to the traditional historical view, is absolutely fascinating. Here's how it worked. Step 1, you carve a hard metal punch with the letter backwards. Step 2, you hammer that punch into a softer copper matrix. Step 3, you place that matrix into an adjustable handheld mold. And finally, step 4, you pour in a molten alloy. And get this, that specific alloy, a mixture of lead, tin, and antimony, was his absolute secret sauce. It melted at a low temperature, cast beautifully, and cooled incredibly fast. The end result? You get identical, highly durable letters that could be quickly cast, arranged, and reused thousands of times. A total game changer. But hey, let's take a quick, fascinating forensic detour here. For centuries, that super sophisticated punch-in matrix method was universally attributed to Gutenberg right from the start. But did he actually invent this method right out of the gate? Or was his initial prototype, far more primitive?
Well, a 2001 study completely shook up this narrative. A physicist and a Princeton librarian analyzed digital scans of an early papal bull printed by Gutenberg, and they mapped out these incredibly precise irregularities in his earliest texts, specifically looking at really simple characters like hyphens. They concluded that these variations couldn't possibly come from a single, reusable copper matrix. Instead, they hypothesized that his true first method was a really painstaking, one-time use sand casting technique, kind of like a cuneiform style where simple shapes were just pressed into sand. This suggests his molds were actually destroyed after every single cast. So early on, he wasn't fully polished. He was likely still iterating, just trying to find that ultimate scalable solution.
Section 3. The 42-line Bible Project. Regardless of what his exact early casting method was, by 1450, Gutenberg was back in Mainz and he was fully ready to scale up. But as we all know, hardware startups are super expensive. To build this ambitious flagship project, he needed serious capital. So he secured his first round of what we can basically think of as venture capital from a wealthy moneylender named Johann Fust. We're talking a massive 800 guilders. He also brought on a highly skilled former scribe from Paris named Peter Schoffer, who is believed to have helped design some of those early typefaces. Fast forward to 1455, and the workshop produced its absolute masterpiece, the 42-line Bible. And the contrast in output here is just staggering. Before this, a traditional manuscript Bible took a single scribe over a year to prepare, and obviously it was highly prone to human copying errors. But the Gutenberg Bible, they produced about 180 copies simultaneously, with completely identical text. They sold for 30 florins each. Now, sure, that was roughly 3 years' wages for a clerk, but a buyer could own a flawless, identical copy of a massive book for a fraction of the cost and time it previously took to write by hand. The value proposition was absolutely undeniable.
Section 4. Bankruptcy and Betrayal.
The 42-line Bible was a soaring technical masterpiece. It was a total market validation of the technology. But, right as it hit the market, Gutenberg's 15th century startup suffered a catastrophic boardroom dispute. His investor, Johann Fust, basically accused Gutenberg of misusing the partnership's funds. Fust sued him in the Archbishop's court, demanding his original investments back along with a 6% interest rate. This created a crushing, almost unimaginable financial weight of over 2,000 guilders. A surviving legal document from November 1455 lays out the brutal outcome. The court actually sided with the investor. This resulted in a total hostile takeover. Fust won complete control over the Bible printing workshop, which left Gutenberg effectively bankrupt and completely stripped of his life's work, right at the very moment of his greatest triumph. And add insult to injury, Fust and his new son-in-law, Peter Schoeffer, took over the printing enterprise and just didn't look back. In August 1457, they published the Mainz Psalter. It was a groundbreaking new book, actually the very first European book to feature the printer's name and the date of publication. In it, they openly bragged about the ingenious mechanical printing process used to create it. But you know what's missing? They made absolutely no mention of Johannes Gutenberg. The founder had been completely erased from the credits of his own invention. Section 5. The Information Revolution.
But, as they say, information wants to be free. When the city of Mainz was sacked in 1462, fleeing printers spread Gutenberg's uncredited invention rapidly across Europe. This mass spread of literature sparked a true information revolution. Historians argue that this rapid dissemination of ideas made the Renaissance, the Reformation, and the humanist movement entirely possible. Take Martin Luther's 95 Theses, for example. They were printed and circulated so widely that it fundamentally shook the power structures of Europe. The printing press was the silent engine beneath it all.
The American writer Mark Twain perfectly distilled Gutenberg's colossal legacy. He wrote, "What the world is today, good and bad, it owes to Gutenberg. For the bad that his colossal invention has brought about is overshadowed 1,000 times by the good with which mankind has been favored." Twain recognized that this technological leap fundamentally rewired human history. It literally took us out of the Middle Ages and launched us into modernity. Now, Gutenberg himself did receive a modest court pension late in life, but his grave was ultimately lost, and he never got to see the true global scale of what he created, which leaves us with a pretty brutal reality of innovation to ponder long after this explainer ends. Gutenberg lost his company, he faced immense debt, and yet his invention created our modern world. So, who else is out there right now, silently changing the world while someone else reaps the reward? Thanks for joining me for this explainer. Keep learning and keep questioning.